Last week, Tom talked about imitators and influencers, a theme picked up by the young people as part of their Roots lesson and reflected on in their prayers and work. There are two things in particular that I noticed. One was their reflections on the people who influenced them, and then the game in which they followed Sophie and sought to play out that game of Sophie says. It made me reflect on those people who have had a positive influence on my life. So I'd like to pick on 4 from very different periods of my life. I could obviously have picked many more. In my teenage years, there was the Reverend Bill Stubbs, the minister in Bawtry, and responsible for work with young people. We had many a long conversation and did a lot of work and planning together. The second was Joe Ibbotson, the head of Waverley School, who appointed me to what was then a scale post and supported me in my application to become a head. The third was Jeff Sadler, a primary advisor with Rotherham, who I worked with on issues of IT in school. Finally, Alice Gaunt, who I met when we came to live in Sprotborough and to worship here. She was a member of the congregation and we would often visit her and talk about matters of faith. Note I picked 2 from my career as a teacher and 2 in relation to church. All these people had characteristics in common, characteristics which made them good, positive influences, and it's on those that I want to focus. First, they were gentle characters, but they were all made of steel. They had a clear vision, but didn't seek to impose their ideas by force, but by gentle persuasion. I always thought of Joe as the real gentleman in manner, behaviour and dress. I've never lived up to that last aspect. You just have to ask Jean. Secondly, they cared about me and showed it in their concern. When things didn't go right or when I was anxious or unwell, they all challenged me and made me think. It wasn't about platitudes, it wasn't about simply being nice, because that would never have moved me forward. They listened to me in my foolishness, but thought there might be something there worth encouraging and developing. They gave me an opportunity to find my voice. Bill Stubbs encouraged me to become a local preacher. He's a lot to answer for. Joe encouraged me to undertake study for an MA, almost unheard of in a primary teacher, and not appreciated by certain Doncaster counsellors who thought during interviews that I thought too much of myself, suggesting that I was perhaps too clever by half, whatever that means. I hope I listened, observed and learnt from them, for they taught me much about how to become an influencer. So from very different backgrounds and very different perspectives, they all displayed similar attributes, a gentle yet firm approach, an approach that displayed care and compassion, and a genuine desire to nurture and develop my faith and understanding, not for their own gain or aggrandisement, but from a selfless, loving and helpful perspective. After I had reflected on these things, I went back to that passage for today where Paul reflects on his time at the church in Thessalonica. These were some of the ideas he wanted to get across about the ways in which he sought to influence them in their pursuit of faith. He wants to talk about their motives. Notice he begins by saying, our message was a message to encourage you. He went on to say, when we speak, we're not trying to please people, but to please God. He also very much sought to emphasise that we were very gentle with you, like a mother caring for her children. At the harvest service, I talked about nurturing. And Paul's final comment here is very much the idea of nurture, when he talks about we were like a mother caring for her children. There's no doubt that young children feel safe in the company of their mothers, usually with complete justification. They also soon learn to trust others. If Sophie from SMC Kids was to leave the other children in a Sophie says, you know that she's not going to lead them into danger, because even at her tender age, she shows that she is thoughtful and caring. Being an influencer has become an in word. On the internet, there are people through YouTube, Facebook and Instagram, etc., who have huge followings. There can be considerable financial rewards for those with large followings and who recommend certain products. Paul raised the issue of motives behind being an influencer. He was keen to say that we were not trying to get your money. So what are the motives of those who seek to influence us? Paul goes on to emphasize his own motives and methods in promoting the gospel. But what about others? Throughout history, we have seen people who have been able to exert huge influence, but have their motives always been the right ones? We still see people using their influence either to gain power or to make money. I've read a number of historical novels over recent months that reflect back on the Nazis' time in power in Germany and the way Hitler found the means to influence people and public opinion, usually by appealing to some of the worst features of the human character. There's no doubt that he and his followers sought to stir up hatred for certain groups and then played on people's fears, such that few were prepared to stand up for what was right. It led to concentration camps, gas chambers, and the annihilation of millions of people. As my rambling thoughts progressed, I began to reflect upon some modern influencers who have tried to present a much more positive image and have a much less selfish point of view. I thought of Malala Yousafzai, a young activist for female education and a Nobel Prize laureate. She nearly died for her cause as the Taliban sought to silence her. She took huge risks as she stood up for her cause against those who would wield power and hatred against her. There's Greta Thunberg, a Swedish environmental activist trying to increase our awareness of the negative impacts of climate change, with a desire to empower young people to make their voices heard, because in the end, it's their world that is being changed and their futures played with. She's up against many powerful groups and some politicians in other parts of the world who suggest there's no such thing as climate change. Then there's one less prominent on the world stage. A young girl called Emma Gonzalez, a pupil who survived the house school shootings of 17 of her fellow scholars in Florida. She started a march for our lives to try and get people to realise the need for gun control. She's faced real opposition from the National Rifle Association, whose use of money and influence dominates much of American politics, where so often they suggest that the solution is more arms, not less, despite over 15,000 people being fatally shot in 2019. I feel encouraged that all the people I mention are young. It gives me some reason for hope that there are people out there, and I'm sure there are millions more, who are working to build a better world. As Paul states in his letter that, in the words of the children's version of the passage, God helped us to be brave and to tell you his good news. As a result, his visit to Thessalonica was not without success. As I was writing this, one of our members called me for a chat and reflected upon her own motives for helping one of her neighbours. But she worried in case there was any selfish motive. But I know that her help came from a position of love and care for others as part of her Christian faith, something she repeatedly displays. So why do we want to be influencers? Well, Paul sums it up when he says that he came to tell them the good news of God's amazing and transforming love, as shown in the life and death of our Saviour Jesus Christ. The other set lesson for today is from Matthew. We are reminded of the commandment of Jesus to give us to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind and soul, and to love your neighbour as you love yourself. This has to be our motive for all we do. It's a transformative act for our own lives and, as a result, for the lives of others. Think about all those who have influenced you in a positive way and helped you on your journey of life. Do you, like me, remember their caring and compassionate approach, their gentleness set within a steel frame, one in which they offered you help and guidance, not by saying nice things for the sake of it, but in order to encourage and move forward? There were no lies, no evil plan, no desire for financial gain, no selfish motives, but genuine love, care and concern. What will we take from this letter? Will we check out our motives? Will we seek to see if our motives fit in that commandment of Jesus? Are we happy to share our lives with others in the joyous knowledge of the good news of the kingdom? Let's make our voices heard, not just through our words, but through our actions. As a result, there's no doubt we will help to build a better world. We don't seek to have followers for ourselves, but for our Saviour. Be brave, be bold, for the Lord your God is with you. He will be your motivator, He will be your influencer, and He will make a difference to your life, and through you, the lives of others. Yes, we can build a better world.